Thank you. I tried to learn Ukrainian last night, but one night was not enough. So I have to stick to English and try to be short. There was when John Mayer was a very famous guitar player and Eric Clapton was young, he said this Eric Clapton is a good one because it's sharp, short, straight to the point. So we will try to be similar somehow. Next year, and I'm sure the ambassador and my friend Anna Pastore, who I thanks, know very well, next year is the Leonardo da Vinci 500 years. So there will be more. But first of all, grazie, thank you. Thank you, the Italian Embassy, the Italian Institute of Culture, CANactions, who are been friends of mine already for a few years. The school I will visit tomorrow. I'm an academic and a teacher, so I will feel comfortable at school. So here we are. This is my first time in Ukraine. I love finding all this snow and the city in a very strong attitude, I think, to welcome me. That's it. I was speaking about Leonardo because Leonardo da Vinci meant already 500 years ago this humanistic synthesis of science and design, science and architecture, science and urbanism, science and object design, science and research. Italian designers come from the world of architecture. In the history of our academic curriculums, there was no difference between interior design, architects, till like 10 years ago, 10, 15 years, landscape designers, till then, 10 years ago. So all the big guys, Castiglioni, Sozzas, everybody in the world, this is very bad, everybody in the world, all the guys you know from their beautiful work, they were trained as architects. And we could not really speak of design as an isolated discipline, but it was about design culture. And by design culture, I'm very happy that when we come out of Italy, design culture is a wider approach which involves architects, planners, graphic designers, object designers, furniture designers, and so on. So we will speak about design culture. I'm not a super expert in industrial design, but I think that this idea of the architects as we will celebrate Leonardo da Vinci next year, the MAXXI, somehow with an exhibition, because we like this idea of the humanistic synthesis of the arts and the science. We'll speak about our approach, Marxistic, not Marxistic, Marxist architecture as the way we approach issues like sustainability, but also the way we approach the promotion of young talents in architecture, which is something I do together also with CANactions in a European program we do together, but it's a major commitment, especially in a country like Italy, which has been super successful in architecture and super important theoretically in the 60s, 70s, but then kind of lowered its relevance in the architectural world, except of course for Renzo Piano, which is always the saint in our firmamento. A few premises: architecture is not only made of building, Architecture is not only made of architecture. Of course, buildings are important. This is the Savoie, we all know it. You also know it that probably Fondation Le Corbusier is trying to transform Ville Savoie as the museum for Le Corbusier, building something next to it. But the architecture is also made of buildings that were never born, like the drawings by Santelia, the Italian futurist, that was so important in inspiring all the 20th century research in architecture. Architecture is made of people. To do a good building, you need a good client, a good committente, as we say. Adriano Olivetti, the industrial, the tycoon, was extremely important for Italian architecture, design, industrial design, graphic design, urbanism, and politics. It's very likely that in July this year, the Olivetti modern part of the city built for the Olivetti company will become a UNESCO site. I mean, a year after pizza, I have to say, but Anyway, it will be very important that we acknowledge this modern legacy. We talk about preservation every other day, and the preservation of modernity is a big, big important issue. Architecture is made of books, no? We all know this, we see books here. In 1966 was a strange year when all the important books for architecture came out. The Venturi book, the Aldo Rossi book, and many others. Architecture is made of journals. Today it's very difficult to keep an architecture journal alive, no? Because the students see everything on the web, everybody can see everything on the web, so it's a hard time, but still, I mean, Domus and Casabella were founded 1928, so they are 90 years old, and they still somehow there. Abitare is a bit younger, but it's a big challenge for our generation's journals, where we were really waiting for, no? To go to the kiosk and buy the new issue of the magazine, because you would see the new things happening there. Architecture is often made of unbuilt projects, no? That become important even though they were never built. This is a crazy project by a group led by Bruno Zevi to transform the whole east sector of Rome in the 60s, with all the important architects collaborating. And it's beautiful because it was happening, it was popping out in every master plan of the city for 40 years, called the Sistema Direzionale Orientale, the SDO, but never happened. But when you go to Rome, you go to Stazione Tiburtina, the station, the second station, it has this orientation because of this model. Now you have this kind of archaeology of a future that never happened through an unbuilt project. Architecture, of course, is made of politics. No? I was shocked when I went the first time to Nuremberg and I saw the spare buildings. And you could not imagine Nazism, I think, without that 3 million people arena, no, without the architecture of Albert Speer. So politics are extremely, I know it very well here, of course, for architecture. Architecture is also made of institutions, of museums, biennales, centers for architecture. And museums are interesting on both sides. On one side, because every architect wants to design a museum, no? Everybody, this is Frank Lloyd Wright with his Guggenheim model, and all the architects would kill themselves, no? To get a commission to build an important museum, especially in the end of the 20th century, when all the big guys were building a museum a day, no? But a museum is also a place where architecture is displayed, where architecture is offered to the public. Museum is a place of research. It's a place for the production of theory. No? It's a place to change architecture from one day to another. And MoMA, of course, did it many times, so the institution have a role. Besides being beautiful buildings or important buildings, MoMA, for instance, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, had the power to change the architecture scene at least 3 times. No? First time in 1932, when Philip Johnson, the young Philip Johnson, brought the modern architecture, the European modern architecture to America, to tell the Americans they should start to build like Bauhaus, no? Or like Corbu, with this funny difference that in Europe, modern architecture was the architecture of welfare, was the architecture for the poor, was the architecture made by the state, the institution. And in America, modern architecture became cool, no? The villas by the directors in California, the houses, you had to be snob to build a poor building, to have a poor building in New York, or in the West Coast in those times. This was the first exhibition. The MoMA was not at the MoMA yet. It was an apartment, a flat in Rockefeller Center, no? where the Corbu and every other guy's work was exhibited. MoMA changed the scene again at the end. I will leave it there. At the end of the 60s, when they made this series of lectures by Peter Eisenman, Richard Mayer, John Hajduk, Richard Watney, Michael Graves, and then they made a book which became an exhibition, and then the 5 architects were there, no? The white architects changing and bringing conceptualism back, bringing mannerism in the modern scene, and being then very, very important around the world. And also building a lot of relations with Italy, no? They were very much tied to the legacy of Terragni, Moretti, all the Italian guys. Finally, 1988, the beginning of the star system Now the Archistar word was started from another exhibition at MoMA, 1988, but that again by Philip Johnson. So 56 years later, he was still there, managing the situation and doing the exhibition with Eisenman, Gehry, Zaha, Ramkulas, Libeskin, Eisenman, and Kopirner-Blau, and Bernard Shubin. So the museums have the power to change the architectural world. In Italy also we have interesting institutions historically. This is the Triennale in Milano. Triennale was super important. The building was done by Museo, but the Biennale was in Monza before. And Triennale has been a very important point of references for Italian architects for a long, long time, especially in the 30s when there was a lot of experimentation. So they were building, I mean, all this kind of boring discussion about the fact that you can exhibit art, but you cannot exhibit architecture, no? Because architecture is not there. You place drawings, photos, but in the Triennale they made buildings as exhibition items already in the 30s, no? So they killed this useless discussion very early. In 1968 there was this beautiful story. There was a very important exhibition done by Giancarlo De Carlo, a very important architect. It was dedicated to the big number. The culture of the 20th century is a culture about the masses, big masses changing the world. So the exhibition was about the mass, was curated by Giancarlo De Carlo, was involving a lot of architects and artists from all over the world. But then the day of the opening, the other architects and the other students and the architects occupied the Biennale and crashed down the whole exhibition, which never happened. No? So you had also this typical 1968 conflict within the leftist parties, which is also very typical in Italy and in Europe, and De Carlo confronting the occupiers here outside the Biennale, the Triennale. 1973 there was another super important architecture exhibition curated by Aldo Rossi, inviting all his friends around the world. I mean, Italy was central in this kind of international scene at this moment with all. Here in the photo you can see Scolari, Michael Graves, Richard Mayer. So it was again an exhibition that changed something in the architecture story. In the 70s it was also important because from the museum, both the artists in the beginning, if you think of California, early 70s, and Ruscha, all these people, the land artists, but then the architects wanted to come out of the museums and do things on the street, not only building, do performance, do installations. This is Alison and Peter Smithson with an Italian artist sitting in the middle of the street to fight functionalism. No? Modernism was about the separation of functions. The street for the cars, the street for the trains, the pedestrian place. They said no, mix it. No? You have to mix to keep the city alive, and we have to bring everything together on the streets. 1973, Venturi's book on Las Vegas came out when we learned that we could learn. We learned that we could learn also from the evil, no? From Las Vegas, the evil architecture at all, the death of classic ideas of architecture. And in Italy you had a very incredibly interesting story, which is this event which was called the Roman Summer. Rome in the 70s was not a pleasant place. I was a student, we were fighting the police every Saturday, there was somebody dying every week, there was political crime, there was terrorism, people wouldn't go out in the streets for shopping. Then in 1975 there was this first progressive mayor who was not a politician, he was the most important art historian. Giulio Carlo Argan. And Argan appointed this crazy guy Renato Nicolini, who's a young architect, as a chancellor for culture. And Nicolini put together a few interesting people. You see Achille Bonitoliva, a very important art critic at the time, Guttuso, a painter, Joseph Beuys, and other people. And they created this thing which was bringing everything on the streets. Theater, a lot of theater, performance, architecture, art, dancing, music, everything was brought in the streets of the city. The beginning was this crazy thing, just only a big white sheet put on the Basilica di Massenze, so one of the most important archaeological monuments in the city. And then you had 20,000 people watching a film in the Foro Romano at night. So basically it was successful because it was for two interesting aspects. One was this idea of architecture as an ephemeral thing. So for the first time we started to think that architecture not necessarily is forever. No, architecture can be for one day, for a week, for a month, for 1 year, 2 years. In the Baroque tradition in Rome, this was there very much. And the other acquisition was to transform the political discourse from violence to culture. So Estate Romana succeeded in changing the political discourse from violence to culture for the whole situation. This was an incredible achievement for the moment. Architecturally, there were some interesting things, so a lot of architects were involved. This guy, Franco Purini, designed this little ephemeral theater, which was very successful. Rules and regulations were very easy at the time. You could do this with 10,000 euros. It's interesting, if somebody here has been in the last Art Biennale, there was this beautiful German pavilion, which I liked, which won the prize, which had this fence built around the pavilion, and these Doberman dogs staying there actually 3 times a week for the performance. But in the 70s, I remember a play by a kind of a radical theater company in the Teatrino Scientifico, where the Dobermans were free. They were running after people all around the neighborhood. So there was a precedent. So last summer, we decided to celebrate the 40 years of Estate Romana, so we rebuilt in the garden of the museum the Teatrino Scientifico, and we had, it was very interesting. The play was played, the actors were playing on the ground floor, and the audience was only in the upper floors, like in the tradition of the surgery theater, no? Of the medicine theater. This was of course we rebuilt it in a different way. It was open to be a stage for the event of the museum, but it was important for us to celebrate this power of architecture as a cultural agent and political agent in the city. Of course, the Biennale is an important subject in architecture. Maybe there's still, after so many years, the biggest impact from the Biennale came in the first edition, curated by Portoghesi, when it was using for the first time the Corderie, and he was inviting 10 important architects from Gehry to Kulas to everybody to build their own facades. No? 1980s was postmodernism, 1980s was about facades, no? In architecture. And for that Biennale, you remember Aldo Rossi, the beauty of contradiction in architecture. No? Aldo Rossi is studied today by students as the architect of the city, the architect of context. But at the same time, his most important achievement was a building that was traveling around, no? With no context, adapting to every context around the city. Coming to our experience, this is the MAXXI. It was a huge competition. It was the outcome of these 2 years of utopia we had in Italy with Prodi, when Prodi was president. And we had a Ministry of Culture that for the first time in the history of the country said that we should as an institutionally take care of contemporary culture, so art and architecture. It was created an agency to promote contemporary art and architecture, and the agency issued the competition in at the end of 1998. It is also important that another of the choices by the Prodi government was to give to the Ministry of Culture a lot of military buildings that were abandoned, tutte le caserme, no? So in this old military part in the north area of Rome, and the competition was one of the first big competitions in Italy. It was very much under the Bilbao effect, end of the 90s, so everybody wanted a big Gehry building in Rome. I took part in the competition. I was even selected with a group of friends for the final, but there was Gehry, there was not Gehry, there was Kulas, there was Venol, Sejima, Toyoito, Sotodemura, Gregozzo, all the big guys were there, and I think that Zaha won with the best project, which is incredibly interesting in urban terms, because people crosses the museum to go from one side or the other of the city. The Rome and Lazio supporters cross the museum to go to the stadium, so it's really, and you know, in Rome it's not easy for contemporary architects to get accepted. This museum was very, very successful, I have to say. And it's a very public space, which is good. The museum does a lot of different things, of course. We don't only do exhibitions. It's a perfect space for performance, of course. Somebody who hates Zaha space would say. We have important collections, especially in architecture. We have Scarpa, we have Rossi, Nervi, I mean the Italian big guys. We do a lot of site-specific projects. I mean, to build a collection, I think both in art and architecture today you have different strategies. One is to get together some money and buy art, which is always more and more expensive, or to do exhibition, to do projects with the architect, with the artist, and then they become part of your collection. The first exhibition we did was an exhibition displaying a large part of the art collection, but then I invited 10 architects to do their own project on the idea of space. This was a bomb designed by Bernard Coury, the Lebanese architect. The idea this was a device to travel as a tourist, cities that are in war. There was a very beautiful story because Bernard was always coming with this super beautiful assistant to do this project. Everybody was looking at this assistant. Then he came to the opening with his wife. And when the wife read the credits, it turned to him and slapped him in the face in the middle of the museum. That was very Mediterranean, I have to say. Photography is super important for us. In the 60s in Italy, there was an incredible crossover between art, architecture, and other disciplines. This completely disappeared in the 70s, exactly when the Rossi generation was there, because the architects were convinced that they were the artists. They need no artist. They were art. They were doing painting. They were the real artists. So in the school, we never had a class of contemporary art. We never had the chance to talk about art when I was a student. And then finally, the only contact we had with real life, with the aesthetics, with the way artists see the world, were photographers. And we had great photographers. We had Luigi Ghirri, which is probably the biggest photographer in Italy in the end of the last, the second part of the 20th century. We had Gabriele Basilico, a wonderful architectural photographer, a whole generation of landscape photographers who became our, I would say, periscope to the world. No? It was the only ones who were telling us that the landscape, the cities, the urban landscape were not what we were studying on the books. They were becoming something different, that we had to change our discipline to face them. So photography is very important, and luckily, the art people never know what to do with photography. They don't want to acknowledge the idea of photography. They think a photographer is only an artist now who eventually once takes a photograph. So we have photography in the architecture collection, which is a very good thing for our exhibitions or for the project we do. We of course promote the legacy. Although we are called the Museum of the 21st century, we do promote the legacy of the 20th century. So we did exhibition on Moretti, a wonderful Roman architect, Le Corbusier in Italy, Nervi. This is the super studio show we did 2 years ago, which is now open in Shanghai. And then we spoke a lot about this yesterday, so we will be very quick today. Critical exhibition, so exhibition that address this idea of sustainability the ambassador was speaking about before. Of course, we don't want to speak about sustainability in terms of solar panels, politically correctness. We find this very boring in the end, so we want to deconstruct the idea of sustainability through a more interesting architectural and design approach. So we did an exhibition on recycle, because sometimes it's much better not to do a building rather than to do a new sustainable building and eventually transform an old one, completely change an old one. And the idea, of course, for us was that to build on top of something which already exists can be more fun than to do something new, no? We don't want to see tabula rasa. We think that working on ruins, corpses, existing, can be extremely exciting, and we did this exhibition to share this idea with everybody. It was also interesting for me, we were discussing this yesterday, this idea that through recycle, you can put together a super interesting, let's say, artistic approach to the idea of conceptualism in architecture, so superimposition, parasite, so all this super conceptual approach together with a very phenomenological one, no? The recycling of the island, or the guy who recycles his plastic. So we were at the same time correct, but we wanted this to be interesting, important, challenging, conceptual-wise, like this project by Eisenman on the Canareggio Piazza, no, in Venice, which never happened, but it was a way of thinking. I wanted to show you this because I love it, and it's the only bit of Ukraine I have here. But it's of course, we like to come out of the idea of pure architecture. This is a wonderful work by a Polish artist about the Potemkin, no? The Eisenstein. So the idea was, this is a 1987 project by this Rybczynski, it's a Polish video maker, and he was shooting these new characters on top of the film of the Potemkin scene steps. And this was extremely important for me to understand what I wanted to do for the recycle show. It was exactly understanding the concept of overwriting, superimpose, but at the same time we were learning how to build through disposal, through landfills, by finding pieces in the landfills in the city and then using them to build a new house in the museum. We did this with Ram Lab of Berlin. Energy against sustainability. Energy for us was important for, first of all, I was able to get money to do this exhibition from an oil company. You know, to do an exhibition on a post-oil architecture. I convinced Eni to give us money. There were three important things I wanted to say. First, that in the 50s, 60s, this idea of oil was an incredible driver for architecture. So all these wonderful guys like Nervi, Bega, building these beautiful highway stations, restaurants, I mean, everything was inspired, highways, everything was inspired positively by oil. The other thing was to disclose this greenwash, no? All this talk about sustainability, which is basically marketing. So this is Arnold Schwarzenegger that was presenting one of these three hydrogen-fueled hammers, no? So I buy a hammer, but I buy it hydrogen-fueled, so I feel I'm sustainable and ecologic. But then I said, if you have to work on post-oil economy today and post-oil architecture, this needs to have an aesthetics. Otherwise, we will never be interested in this. We will never be convinced. So we invited 7 architects from South America, Africa, Europe, North America, to design their own architecture of the post-oil energy. This is Fujimoto, which was interpreting the idea of the pit, no? Where people would go to get water and so talk to the other people. Food, of course, everything is about food in Italy. We are very good in food. Food for us was interesting because it's the only thing that really enters in every conception of the space. From the body, no? The apple that makes you kicked away from the paradise, to your room, to the city, to the markets, This was also very nice, but we can look at it quickly. We couldn't see it yesterday. No, I like this idea of the Japanese tradition of the tatami, because tatami is a modulo which comes from the needs of the space you need for a ceremony of tea, basically. No? So the minimal room you can build in Japan is 1.5 tatami. Then the tatami becomes the modulo for the world, no? Because from the ceremony of tea it gets to the room, from the room it gets to the house, and then everything has a scale which is based of something you need to prepare a tea. No? So the food is incredibly important too, and this was designed by, I was very brave, I mean maybe too brave, because I had an Italian young architect designing the ceremony of tea place for the museum. Of course my Japanese friends were looking at me a little bit strangely, and it took me 3 years to make them tell me what they didn't like in this version. It was the lack of a roof. They said you need a roof in the tea house. But this is a wonderful lady, is a woman in Rome, is 87 years old. She's been teaching ceremony of tea for the last, I think, 50 years. And she rides a horse, she still rides a horse twice a week. Japanese, yes, that made me very interested in Japanese. The last big exhibition we did on architecture in the MAXXI was about Japanese architecture. It was a collaboration with the Japanese Museum and Japan Foundation. And after the MAXXI was exhibited in the Barbican in London and then in Tokyo. What I liked in this experience was this idea of the Japanese house as a place where you wonderfully negotiate tradition and modernity, which is a very big problem for Italians. You know, to be feeling that you're betraying tradition or not, and how you incorporate tradition in modernity, which happens very well in the Japanese house. The second issue was this idea, we have a big problem in creating a virtuous, a happy relationship between the architect and the client in Italy, because people think the architect want to build their own utopia. They don't trust you, they will call an engineer or a geometer or whatever. And in Japan, this idea that the architect is always there, even the most important, even Sejima can be called to design a house of 40 square meters. And they say yes, because they know this is when they build this relationship between the client and the architect. And the house becomes a sort of psychological portrait of the owner, which I think is extremely interesting. And also the third thing is this idea of the city as an informal thing. No? Tokyo is an addition of millions and millions small single-family houses, completely chaotic and perfectly working. So it's my idea. And so to understand the informal city of today, it was very important for me to understand this bottom-up strat. For the Japanese, this is a kind of a reaction to the big planning, developing policies. And also what's very nice, we rebuilt a 1-to-1 scale model of the Toyo Ito Y2, which is a building which is not there anymore, because you know the average time one of these houses exists is 26 years. After 26 years they demolish it, they build another one which is slightly smaller because they need the money to pay taxes. And this is perfect because this house was built for Toyo Ito's sister when she had just lost her husband because of cancer. So she was living in an apartment, she went to Toyo Ito, she said, I need to leave to spend this grief close to the ground. So he built his house, we basically had no window, only windows on the courtyard. And she was there with 2 children, 2 girls. When 20 years later, she went to his brother and said, okay, I'm done. I want to move somewhere else, but I don't want anybody to live here, so we have to demolish the house. We do programs to promote the young talents at the MAXXI. The most relevant, successful one is probably the one we do with MoMA and Istanbul Modern and Santiago del Chile and Seoul in Korea. And it's a project we do every summer in the garden of the museum. You have to be brave because you have to build under Zaha did. I'm sorry that I am always front of my ambassador. And so this was the first year, and it was a very beautiful project we were very happy with. And we liked it. It was this big poppies with this moving hill. We liked it because it was exactly transversal. It was, I cannot tell if it is design, art, land art, landscape, industrial design, I don't know, architecture, but it was extremely successful. The people loved to come to this place, and also these objects became items you can buy through Via Bizzuno, this lighting company from Bologna. So they even generated industrial production as the one the ambassador was referring to before. We participate with CANactions to this program, which is a program involving 20 architectural institutions in Europe for the promotion of young talents. It's funded by EU. We now have another 4 years to go after the first 3 years. And from this year we decided to, maybe the ambassador should be angry to me because of this, because we decided to select the finalist of the Young Architect program through Future Architecture Platform, which means there will not be only Italians from now on. In fact, this year we have, in the final team of 5, we have Italians, Germans, Slovenians, I think, people from all over Europe or the world. Last year with Future Architecture Platform, we did work on this idea of the ephemeral, the State Romana I was quoting before. So we invited 5 young team of architects to work on a new idea of ephemeral architecture. And then we had them working in a museum in a workshop, and then we brought the result, the outcome of this workshop to the Seoul Biennale as a representation of the city of Rome. My favorite project, you were seeing a video before, I do with very young students, is a competition. We do every year for students. The winning team designs this installation on the beach. It's a beach north of Ancona, the Adriatic. It's a super poor, sprawled, miserable urban condition, but in front of this place there is the most sophisticated seafood restaurant of the country by Moreno Cedroni, a wonderful chef. This was the first edition, a tribute to Kyiv. So every year we build this thing for one night. We have some 70, 80 guests from architecture, art, literature, whatever, for one night. And I like it very much because it gives the young, this is for students, for 20 years old, 21 years old, they have the chance to build something, which I think is very interesting to promote design culture, as we were saying before. This was 2 years ago, maybe the most beautiful one, done only with light. This is Daniel Libeskind. Then you have to convince Daniel Libeskind to speak for free at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's not that easy. And I didn't let him speak about these buildings because I don't really like this, so I could speak only about books. And then this is the last project I did with your friend Lisa. We did this project with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy to bring some news about Italian architecture around the world, so we brought it in many institutes, museums, together with the institutes, schools around the world. And it was a selection of 10 Italian architects where the idea of young goes from 90 years old to 25 years old. And also it was interesting to see what are the Italian architects working on in these days. I'm sorry, this is in Italian, but it's recycling, which of course in a country like ours is a problem you deal with every other minute. The changing identity of workplaces. Now people work and it's completely different. When I was asked by this little magazine, student magazine journal in London, to send a portrait of my desk, I was not able to answer. So my desk is my computer, and wherever I am, it's my desk. So work, and I mean the biggest money, production money in Naples is done in basements of houses, no? And then they do these t-shirts and they label it with made in China. So it's a fake, extremely sophisticated marketing. Because other people think it's cheap and they buy it, no? So the workplaces, I think, is a big theme for architects today. You should also I think you're interested in that. Again, this kind of misunderstanding between museums and city. I started to study museums with my PhD in Venice, and the impression was that the city was coming into the museum, no? Leaving the streets and getting into the museum. When James Stirling did the project for Stuttgart, the Neue Staatsgalerie, it was I think the first big superstar museum. The next year after the opening, they had 50 times the number of visitors with the same collection. So this acknowledge a plus value for architecture, no? Basically. So museums and the role, the increasing, even too increasing role they have in our life. The relationship with art. Today I have more artists that come to me to speak about architecture than architects are scared, they don't care, but artists want to work on the space with us, they want to understand architecture in the city. This kind of freedom we have today, you know, compared to the modern obsession of being anti-traditional, anti-old, we are completely free. The young architects can do whatever they want, but of course they need tools to deal with this. But then this idea of instability, you know, architecture that lasts for 1 month or 1 night, architecture that moves, architecture that changes. I mean, this is all very interesting. I mean, I show you very quickly these 10 examples, because they're not the most famous, because we didn't need to do an exhibition on piano, because you can see everything on piano, or you don't need to see the vertical forest once again, which tells you a lot about the power of marketing in architecture. Or Cucinella's building. Cino is probably the best architect in my generation, it's from Milano. I like this project because it's the recycling on an old building in Milan to make it into the Museum of Automobile. I think that your son probably knows it. So it's a recycling project, very sophisticated. This is, according to me, the best architect in Italy. It's a very nasty lady from Sicily who lives in a very small, difficult place. She does only very small projects. She works on her own. She was the only Italian architect who stayed always close to artists in the 80s and 90s. And the project I put in this exhibition, I love it, is this house which is completely closed in the winter. It's near Noto, so a beautiful place in Sicily. But then in the summer, when the people go there, the front part, which is 2 rooms and a bathroom, moves, opens up. So the house slides, basically, and opens up this incredible terrace to the sea. So it's a moving architecture. It was in Aravena's Biennale. Now Giuseppina was fighting with the Grafton because they wanted again, and she said basta. But she's really good. This is a group from Torino, very good guys. And again, they were recycling an existing structure of an old facility on the mountains and building on top of it in a way which is no modern, no traditional, no old, no new, very, very ambiguous, very interesting, I think. Umberto Riva is a wonderful 90 years old guy, 91 years old, extremely sensible with this idea that architecture, he did the installation for the Corbu show for us. We just did an exhibition together with, when I was in the MAXXI with Riva, and there was Bijoy Jain, the guy from Mumbai studio, giving a talk in the next building. So I said, Bijoy, do you want to meet Riva? He said, Umberto Riva, real? Can I touch him? Can I meet him? And then the 2 of them did an exhibition together in Montreal at the CCA. Riva tells you this kind of humanistic continuity between all the scales of architecture. No? He designs tables, he designs exhibition, but at the same time he can design houses that are very, very sophisticated and inventive. Coming back to young architects, this is a beautiful team in Bolzano. In Trentino Alto Adige, the quality of architecture is very high. The money you can spend for quality in architecture is slightly higher than in the rest of the country. Modus is an Italian-Egyptian team, very good. They work with wood. They investigate new idea of structures. This is a building for a sculptor. They did together with the sculptor. Very, very nice. Siusi, Castelrotto. This is where I used to go with when Vittoria was young. Obiere, more about sustainability, more about the new idea of profession, very much based on networking, being everywhere in the world, collaborating. These are some kind of sustainable houses they did in Milano. This is a new museum they just did. This is very interesting. It's a private museum. This woman is a big tycoon. She does packaging machines for cigarettes, so she's full of senses of guilt. So she wants to spend a lot of money for art and for good things and for charity. So she made a private competition and selected these very young architects from Rome, Labics, and built this private museum in Bologna called MAXXI. And it's a museum on photography. She has a large collection of photography that speaks about workspaces. They have a wonderful festival, a wonderful prize. I am in the board for. I mean, it's interesting. A private competition from a private client building a museum exclusively dedicated to photography. So it's very, very interesting. Her name is Serragno. The name of the place is MAXXI. Matilde, this idea of architecture is something borderline between architecture and art. Matilde did this very nice research on informal religious spaces in the city. You know, most of the mosques or the place for this Indian religion, they are like garage or abandoned shops. So they are recycled like informally into religious spaces. Then she designed this religious kit you can bring with you around and use them. It was exhibited in the storefront in New York. And she also designed this moving shop, quite interesting, that was used in Tel Aviv and in other places. And she did the Chisatsu. Started the guys who did the poppies. They're very good. And also, just to go back to our friends here, this is the project they did for the Institute of Culture in Paris. It's an exhibition device, a table that you can change. And then I like this idea of the suspended architecture, you know, something that was on in the air, but then became an important space in the museum. That's it. Grazie.